He kicked the wrong door open, and what he saw on the other side shattered him. A little girl, barely 6, clutching her chest, struggling to breathe, and a woman, screaming her name, eyes wild with panic. But it wasn't the fear that stopped him cold. It was the child's face, those eyes, that chin, that expression. She looked exactly like him. In that moment, the billionaire CEO who thought he had everything realized he might have left behind the one thing that ever truly mattered, his daughter. But before we dive into this heart-shaking story, tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it right now? If you believe in second chances, hit subscribe, drop a like, and leave your location in the comments. Because this story will change how you see love, loss, and the true meaning of family. Christopher Langston was the kind of man headlines loved. CEO of Langston Global, billionaire by 35, cover model of Forbes twice. He had built an empire from nothing but ruthless ambition and sleepless nights. On paper, he had it all: private jets, custom suits, an apartment that overlooked Central Park. But on that particular Tuesday afternoon, as he stood aboard the luxury cruise ship Sea Aurora, staring out at the endless blue ocean, something felt off. He wasn't running toward anything. He was running away, not from competitors, not from investors, from a name he hadn't said out loud in years: Jasmine Carter. There was a letter in his breast pocket, faded, folded, worn at the corners, when he couldn't bring himself to throw away even after all these years. Chris, I waited for you longer than I should have, but I finally learned to stop looking back. I chose life for me, and for the 3 of us. Jasmine, he hadn't read the words in a long time. He didn't need to. They were carved into him. Sea Aurora wasn't just a cruise ship. It was a floating palace. Suites that rivaled penthouses, chefs who trained under Michelin stars, a spa where time practically stopped. This trip was a gift or a punishment from his board after he closed $2, $4 billion merger. Go unwind, they said. He smiled bitterly. Unwinding required something to unravel. He was already fraying. At check-in, the concierge handed him his room card. Penthouse A11, Mr. Langston, enjoy your stay. He nodded absently, barely glancing at the card. The hallway on deck was hushed, lined with polished mahogany and soft lighting. When he reached the door marked A11, he tapped the card and pushed it open. It took him 3 full seconds to realize something was wrong. The room was cozy, not opulent. A crumpled pink jacket lay on the bed. A stuffed unicorn rested on the couch. Crayon drawings were taped to the mini fridge. This was not his suite. Before he could turn around, he heard water shut off in the bathroom. Then footsteps. Then a small voice. Are you the magician Mommy booked? Chris turned. A little girl stood in the doorway, dripping wet in her pajamas, her hair in loose curls. Big hazel eyes stared up at him, unafraid. No, sweetie, he said gently, confused but amused. I think I'm in the wrong room. I knew it, she grinned. Magicians don't wear boring ties. Before he could reply, another voice came, sharper, older, and entirely unamused. Excuse me, who are you and why are you in my room? A woman stepped out from behind the bathroom door. Her hair was damp and tied back in a loose bun. She wore no makeup, but there was something effortlessly striking about her, the kind of beauty that didn't try. Chris froze, so did she. It was one of those moments when time hiccups. Wait, I think, he began. Get out, she said, shielding the little girl behind her. Right now. I'm not. Look, I think I got the wrong room. He pulled out the key card. She snatched it from him and squinted. This says A11, she muttered, then looked at her door. This is A17. She handed the card back to him, expression softening just a little. You're 5 doors down. Chris ran a hand through his hair. Well, this is embarrassing. No kidding, she said. But at least you didn't scream. I don't usually get yelled at by 5-year-olds either. I'm 6. The little girl chimed in proudly. Chris chuckled. The woman sighed. Come on in, Leela, let's get you dried off. Before they disappeared behind the door, she looked back at him. Next time, read the room number. Chris nodded, pocketing the key card. As he walked down the hallway, something lingered, not embarrassment, something else. The curve of her voice, the quiet confidence in her eyes, and the little girl's laugh. He didn't know why. But for the first time in months, he felt something, a flicker, That night, he had dinner alone in the VIP lounge. Caviar truffle pasta, a glass of red older than most of the crew, but it tasted like paper. He kept thinking about the wrong room, about the little girl, about the woman with the quiet fire in her tone. Who was she? Why did she feel familiar? The next morning, he took his espresso to the deck. The wind was softer today, the sea calm, a good day, until he saw security rushing toward cabin A17, and then he heard a voice one he now recognized. "Someone took it. It's gone. My mother's ring. It was here last night." Chris's steps slowed. His heart dropped, because last night he had been the only one in that room. The hallway was crowded with whispers. Chris didn't need to hear all the words to know what they were saying. The ring, heirloom, missing, and then the one phrase that made his blood run cold. He was in the room. Security had arrived. A tall man in a crisp uniform stood beside the woman from yesterday. Elise, he remembered now. She was clearly distraught but composed. The little girl clung to her side, looking up at the adults with wide, confused eyes. Chris hesitated. He could walk away, let this play out, or he could step in. He stepped forward. "Elise," he said. She turned, and the expression on her face twisted from relief to restrained frustration. "You again," she muttered. "This really isn't a good time." "I know," Chris said calmly, "and I'm sorry to intrude, but I was in that room just for a moment and I didn't touch anything." Security turned to him. "Sir, we'll need to verify that." "Of course," Chris replied. "You can check everything. I don't even carry cash. I pay with my face." A flicker of a smile pulled at Elise's lips, but she quickly wiped it away. "It's a gold ring," she said. "Vintage. Emerald stone in the middle. It was my mother's." "We'll do a sweep," the officer said, motioning to a younger crew member. "Sir, we may need to search your suite as protocol." Chris nodded. "Do what you need to." He turned to Elise. "I'm sorry this happened," he said quietly. "If I caused any trouble, I didn't mean to." She didn't respond right away. "Then I don't think you took it, but when you live the life I do, you learn to assume the worst." Her eyes fell to her daughter. "Because hoping for the best is exhausting." Chris didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Later that evening, after security cleared him of all suspicion, Chris found himself staring at the ceiling of his suite. The lights from the chandelier above flickered softly, but his thoughts weren't on the decor. They were with her, Elise Monroe, a name that clung to his memory like dust to velvet. Why did she feel so familiar? He opened his laptop, a habit more than necessity. He wasn't expecting much, but when he typed in her name, something hit him square in the chest. Elise Monroe, emergency room nurse, Queens General Hospital, featured in New York Weekly, the angel who saved a senator's son. He clicked the article. His eyes scanned faster and faster until they hit one line that nearly made him drop the laptop. While most bystanders froze, Nurse Monroe performed CPR on 5-year-old Nathan Langston until medics arrived. Nathan, his nephew, his brother's only child. Chris remembered that day vividly. Family had been on a trip. Nathan collapsed at a park. If it weren't for a nurse who happened to be nearby, he never knew her name until now. The next morning, he waited near the kids' activity center on deck 7. He spotted her instantly, Elise walking hand in hand with her daughter, dressed casually but gracefully. Leela carried a glitter-covered sketchpad and skipped with the freedom only children possess. Chris approached slowly. "I know you said I shouldn't talk to you again," he began, "but I think I owe you more than an apology." Elise narrowed her eyes. "Why are you here? You saved my nephew's life 3 years ago." Her expression changed instantly, shock, then disbelief. "You're Nathan's uncle." He nodded. "My brother called me from the hospital that night, said a woman he'd never met jumped in and gave his son a second chance." "I didn't recognize you," she whispered. "Neither did I until last night." They stood in silence for a long beat. "I'm not used to people remembering," she finally said. "I didn't do it to be remembered." "I know," Chris said. "That's why I remember." She looked down at Leela, who had now wandered toward the crafts table. "You're not what I expected," Elise admitted. "Most people expect a jerk in a $1,000 suit." "You're not that," she teased. Chris smirked. "Fair." They ended up sitting at the small cafe overlooking the water. Nothing fancy, just coffee and, for Leela, a swirl of melted marshmallows in hot chocolate. Chris learned more in that 1 hour than he had in months of boardroom conversations. Elise had been a top med student, dropped out when her father got sick, worked double shifts to afford nursing school, had Leela with a man who vanished the moment he heard pregnant. She hadn't asked for pity, just a place to start again, and she built everything she had with her own hands. Chris didn't pity her. He admired her. For the first time, he didn't feel the need to perform, to impress, to be the Christopher Langston the world expected. He just was. As they walked back toward their respective cabins, Elise paused. "By the way," she said, "they found the ring." Chris blinked. "What? In my daughter's art supply bag?" She smirked. Apparently, she wanted to trace it for a drawing. Chris laughed, a real laugh that echoed through the hallway. She didn't want to tell me because, in her words, I wanted it to be a surprise. They both shook their heads. "Kids," Elise said, exhaling. "You have no idea," Chris replied. "But maybe I'd like to learn." That night, as the moon bathed the ship in silver light, Chris stood on his balcony holding a sketch that Leela had gifted him earlier. 3 stick figures, one big, 2 small, all holding hands. He didn't know what it meant yet, but he knew it felt right. Part 3, The Secret on Shore. The sun broke gently over the horizon as the sea aurora drifted toward a private island off the coast of St. Lucia. The itinerary listed it as a day of rest. But for Christopher Langston, rest had always been a complicated concept. He stood at the railing of Deck 9, morning coffee in hand, watching the fog lift. His phone buzzed with new emails, mergers waiting for approval, analysts forecasting the next billion-dollar move. He didn't open a single one, not today. Because today, he'd invited Elise and Leela to join him. It wasn't about impressing them. He didn't want to be Christopher Langston, CEO. He just wanted to be Chris. They met by the docking bay, dressed in linen and sun hats. Elise wore a simple sundress, pale yellow, her hair pulled back in a braid that seemed to shimmer in the morning light. Leela wore a wide smile and glittery sandals, skipping as if the whole island had been created just for her. "You didn't have to do this," Elise said the moment they stepped into the private tender boat. "The island, the picnic, the whole thing." "I wanted to," Chris replied, helping her aboard. "I figured if I can buy a company in 5 minutes, I can spend one day buying memories instead." Elise smiled but said nothing. The boat ride was quiet, waves slapping gently against the hull, Leela humming a tune to herself. Chris couldn't explain it, but being near them grounded him. There was no pressure to be charming, no expectations to be perfect. With them, he was just a man, not a brand. The island was almost unreal. White sand stretched endlessly. A private cabana was already set up with fresh fruit, chilled lemonade, and a shaded hammock. Leela squealed and ran straight into the water, arms flailing in pure joy. Chris and Elise followed slowly, toes sinking into warm sand. "She's got your spirit," Chris said softly. Elise looked out at her daughter, eyes warm. "She's got more courage than I've ever had. Where do you think she gets that?" Elise turned to him. "From surviving me." He frowned gently. "What do you mean?" She paused. "I've made a lot of mistakes, took jobs that kept me away from her, said yes to people I shouldn't have trusted, built walls so high I forgot how to climb them." Chris looked at her, really looked. "Then maybe it's time someone helped you take them down." They spent hours in the sun, playing tag with Leela, collecting shells, laughing until it hurt. Chris couldn't remember the last time he laughed like that, not in boardrooms, not at charity galas. In the late afternoon, Elise sat beneath a palm tree, sketching while Leela napped in the hammock. Chris watched her fingers move across the page, delicate, intentional. "You draw?" "A little," she said. "Helps me think." "What are you thinking now?" She didn't answer immediately. Then she set the sketchbook down. "That I should have told you the truth sooner." Chris sat beside her, his expression shifting. "What truth?" Elise looked down, voice barely above a whisper. "Leela isn't just mine." Chris's breath caught. "She's yours." The words landed like thunder in his chest. He blinked once, twice. "You're saying?" "I didn't plan it," she said quickly, eyes glassy. "We were young, one night, you left, I didn't know how to reach you. And when I finally did, you were already building an empire. I didn't want to be another story of a woman trying to trap a billionaire with a baby." Chris's world shifted beneath him. All the years, all the decisions, the empty holidays, the quiet ache he couldn't name. And all this time he had a daughter. Leela, the girl who traced rings and drew crowns and sang off-key like no one was listening. His daughter. He stood up, pacing in the sand. "Why now?" he asked. Elise rose too. "Because I didn't expect to see you, and when I did, I saw a man I didn't recognize, one who listens, who watches, who laughs like he forgot how but wants to remember." "I don't know what to say," Chris whispered. "You don't have to say anything," she replied. "Just don't walk away." He looked at her, at the truth in her eyes, at the woman who had raised his child alone, with dignity, with love, and for once, Chris Langston didn't feel like a CEO. He felt like a man being given a second chance. He walked over to the hammock, knelt beside it, and brushed a curl from Leela's cheek. She stirred, smiled in her sleep. Chris looked back at Elise. "I'm not going anywhere." It had been hours since she read the letter. Elise stared at the envelope as if it might vanish if she wished hard enough. But the truth was still there, inked and irreversible. Chris Langston, the man whose face her daughter unknowingly mirrored, was Leela's father. And he didn't know. She couldn't sleep. The room felt too still, too loud with what-ifs. Leela stirred beside her in the twin bed, small arms tangled in a stuffed sea turtle they'd bought from the ship's gift shop. Outside, wind had picked up. The ship rocked slightly, subtle but noticeable. Elise's chest tightened. How do you tell a man who lost his soul to ambition that he unknowingly left behind the most human part of himself? Chris woke before dawn, unable to explain the ache in his chest. He dreamed of Elise's laughter, then of silence, a silence that felt final. When the sun rose, he walked the upper deck in search of her. Nothing. She wasn't at breakfast, not in the library, not even at the daycare with Leela. His mind, sharp as ever in business, suddenly spun with worry. Then just before noon he saw her, standing alone at the stern, her hair whipped by the wind. "Elise," she turned, startled. "You okay?" he asked, stepping closer. She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I needed air. You've been avoiding me." "No, not you, just everything." There was a pause taut with tension. "Elise," he said quietly, "are you running from something?" Her lips parted, but nothing came out. She wanted to tell him right there, but fear sat heavy on her tongue. "I'm not who you think I am," she said instead. Chris looked at her for a long moment. "I don't think you're anything, Elise. I'm trying to know you. You shouldn't." "Why?" "Because the moment you do, everything will change." That evening, a tropical storm warning was announced. The ship would adjust course and dock early at a nearby island until conditions improved. Passengers grumbled, but Chris barely heard them. His mind was with Elise, whose sudden withdrawal gnawed at him like unfinished business. When he saw Leela playing in the arcade later, alone, he instinctively walked over. "Hey, you okay, Munchkin?" She looked up and grinned. "Hi, Mr. Chris, Mommy's sleeping. She said I could play." He kneeled beside her, watching her tiny fingers press buttons with glee. "You like games, huh?" She nodded, then paused. "Mommy says I'm like my daddy, smart and stubborn." Chris chuckled. "Yeah, where's your daddy?" Leela shrugged. "He's a secret." That word secret landed like ice in his chest. That night after dinner, Elise knocked on Chris's sweet door. He opened it instantly, as if he'd been standing there waiting. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice tight. "Okay." She stepped in. The rain had started, light but steady. "I've lied to you," Elise whispered. Chris tensed. "About what?" She looked down. "About Leela." He didn't breathe. She's yours." The words dropped like thunder. Chris staggered back a step. "What?" "I didn't know I was pregnant when you left, and by the time I found out you were already married, then divorced, then unreachable." Silence swallowed the room. Chris stared at her. "You knew this whole time?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I wanted to tell you. I wrote letters. I kept the truth for her safety, not out of spite." Chris's jaw tightened. "Do you know what it's like to wonder if you've ever left something behind, something real?" Elise stepped forward. "She is real, and she is good, because of you and in spite of you." The storm outside howled louder. The ship rocked slightly, as if mirroring the chaos inside the room. "Let me meet her," Chris said suddenly. "Not as a stranger, as her father." Elise studied him. "And what if she doesn't need you?" "I need her." That answer broke something open. They stood in silence as lightning cracked beyond the balcony. "I don't want your money," Elise whispered. "I don't want your guilt." Chris replied. They were raw, exposed, and honest, two people who had spent years building walls now learning how to tear them down. Chris had faced billion-dollar deals collapsing in front of him. He'd navigated boardroom betrayals, hostile takeovers, media scandals. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for the look in Leela's eyes that night. It began with a soft cough, then another. Elise was in the shower and Leela had curled up on the couch in Chris's suite after dinner. It was the first time Elise had let her daughter spend any significant time alone with him, not as a stranger, but as the man he now was, her father. Chris was reading her a bedtime story, his voice unsure but steady when Leela's breathing changed. It became shallow, whistling, then frantic. "Leela," she clutched her chest. He dropped the book. Hey, look at me." She was gasping now, her lips turning a frightening shade of pale. He scooped her into his arms and ran barefoot, heart pounding, shouting for help before he even reached the hallway. Elise came running, towel around her shoulders, panic on her face when she saw the crew rushing toward the ship's infirmary. "Chris!" she shouted, but the only answer was the hiss of the elevator doors closing. In the sterile white of the medical bay, Chris sat beside Leela's bed, her small hand in his. "She's going to be okay," the nurse said, adjusting her oxygen mask. "It was a severe asthma attack. Thank God you acted fast." Chris barely nodded. "She's had a few episodes," Elise said softly, entering the room, "but never this bad." He looked at her, eyes red, voice hollow. "I thought I lost her before I ever really got to have her." Elise moved closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You didn't." They sat like that for a long moment. A nurse closed the curtain gently behind them. "You carried her all the way here?" Elise asked. "I ran like hell." "She's okay because of you." "No, she's okay because of who she is." Elise smiled through tears. "She's stubborn like you." Chris chuckled bitterly. "And trusting like you." They looked down at her sleeping form. The rise and fall of her tiny chest never looked so miraculous. The next morning, Leela stirred awake. Her first words were muffled behind the oxygen mask. "Mr. Chris?" He smiled. "I'm here, sweetheart." She reached out for him. He took her hand. "Can I call you Dad?" she asked, small voice, big heart. Tears spilled from Chris's eyes before he could speak. Elise covered her mouth. "Yes," he choked out. "You can call me anything you want." In the days that followed, everything shifted. Chris no longer returned to his penthouse suite after dinner. He stayed in Elise's cabin on the pull-out couch at first, then later in the armchair beside Leela's bed. He learned how to make oatmeal the way she liked it. Learned she hated peas, learned that she giggled in her sleep when she was happy. He learned to love her out loud, not with money, but with presence. One evening, Elise found a small card on her pillow, a note in Chris's unmistakable handwriting. "Thank you for raising her, for keeping her safe, for giving me a chance to try." She held it to her chest, eyes wet. Then came the decision. "I want you both in my life," Chris said one night over dinner. "Permanently?" Elise raised an eyebrow. "Are you proposing?" Chris smiled. "Not yet, I'm inviting." "To what?" "To a home, not a mansion, not a PR stunt, just a home with me, with us." Leela beamed. Elise studied him. "You'll have to earn it," she whispered. "I plan to," he replied. Every single day. They stood on the shore, waves licking at their ankles, the ship now a distant silhouette in the golden horizon. The Sea Aurora had docked early at a private island resort to avoid the trailing edge of the storm, and the decision to stay a few days longer wasn't about weather anymore. For Elise, it was about time. For Chris, it was about proof. For Leela, it was just the best birthday ever. She turned 6 that morning. The birthday party was simple, a picnic by the water, cupcakes with seashell toppers, paper crowns, and a few of the ship friends Leela had made. No celebrity performers, no velvet ropes, just honest, joyful noise. Chris stood off to the side, watching her spin in a circle of giggles, sunflowers in her hair. "She looks like you," said a voice behind him. He turned. It was his mother, Eleanor Langston. He hadn't expected them to come, not his mother, not his father. But Elise had extended the invitation quietly and sincerely. "I think they should know who she is, who you are now," she had said. Alina wore her signature pearls, her mouth pressed into a tight line, not disapproving but hesitant. Chris hadn't spoken to her in nearly 3 years. She's got your stubborn chin, she added. Chris exhaled. And Elise's everything else. Alina smiled, small and surprising. Why didn't you tell us? She asked gently. Chris stared at the sand. Because I didn't know how to explain loving something I didn't know I was missing. Alina reached out, touched his arm. Maybe you don't have to explain, just show us. Later that afternoon, Leela pulled Chris by the hand toward the gift table. I saved yours for last, she squealed. Chris knelt down. Well, I hope it's good. She tore into the paper. Inside was a wooden box. Inside the box, a small necklace, a tiny gold compass. Leela tilted her head. What's this for? Chris smiled. So you never feel lost, and so you always know where home is. Elise teared up. Leela threw her arms around him. You're the best dad ever. It was the first time she'd said it without hesitation. Chris held her tight, closing his eyes. This was wealth, not his net worth, but this moment. That night, under strings of lanterns and a sky full of stars, Chris stood up and tapped a glass. I have something to say, he began, nerves cracking his voice. Everyone turned. I built my life chasing success, but somewhere along the way I forgot what success actually looks like. He looked at Leela, at Elise, at his parents. It's showing up when it matters. It's choosing love over legacy, and today I'm choosing both, but on my terms. He took Elise's hand. I'm stepping down from the Langston Corporation, effective immediately. Gasps, Chris smiled. I'm not walking away from power, I'm walking into purpose. The silence was deafening, then broke into applause. Elise looked stunned. You're really doing this? I already did, he whispered. They danced barefoot on the beach that night. No tuxedos, no photographers, just sand between their toes and a promise in their eyes. Chris kissed her forehead. I lost years, he said, but I won this. Elise smiled. So did we. As the lanterns floated skyward, Leela chased one down the shore, arms stretched. Chris and Elise watched her in the golden dusk. I used to think the world owed me something, Chris said. Turns out it was waiting for me to give something instead. Elise nodded. Gave us you? He squeezed her hand. And you gave me a reason. The screen fades to black, then a simple message. Success isn't measured by what you build, but by who you become when everything else is stripped away. And sometimes the wrong room on a cruise ship is exactly where your real story begins. The end. If this story moved you, consider subscribing to our channel for more stories like this. Leave a comment with where you're watching from, and remember, real success is measured by love, not wealth.